He's waiting.
Okay, everyone, thanks for coming to this afternoon session. We got Grabowski from NEO, and he's going to give us an update. He's really a globetrotter, and he just got back from going to China. So this is going to be an excellent session because he's going to talk all about his travels, what NEO's doing, and how you can use that in the enterprise. So I'm turning over to Dylan now.
Thank you, John. So before I kind of jump into the presentation, who here is familiar with NEO as a public blockchain? A few people, okay, so awesome. So I recently went to Shanghai to visit NEO headquarters and to also speak to a closed door symposium that was available to the press for, we had access to 7 public blockchain projects that are based out of Southeast Asia and China. So I'm going to be conveying a lot of the sentiment that was forwarded by those individuals. So a little bit about me. I have a master's in urban planning. I was an urban planner up until last year. I got my master's here at University of Colorado, Denver. I've worked at various levels of the government, at the county level, at the state level, and at the federal level. In January 2018, I transitioned out of urban planning into the blockchain ecosystem, and instead of becoming a jack of all trades, I opted to become a master of one and jumped hardcore into NEO. So I work for NEO News Today. I'm an editor. I conduct podcasts. I also conduct in-person interviews. We traveled to both the DevCons, and we also got invited out to Shanghai last month. And on top of that, I also host a local meetup where we connect developers with workshops, we connect individuals with NEO-based people who live in Colorado, and we're also looking forward to bringing other US-based projects into Colorado to tell them about what they're doing, how they're building on top of NEO. And then very recently, as of this month, I'm also the strategic marketing manager for a local company called Grabowski. And there are some individuals here who represent Grabowski, and we can talk about that later. So last month, Shanghai, I was one of 20 people from across the globe who were invited to participate in a community assembly to discuss the future of the blockchain. It's currently going through its 3rd iteration and will be updating to NEO 3.0, much like Ethereum is updating to Ethereum 2.0 in the near future. And here you can see I get to hang out with Dahong Fei and Eric Chang, the lead coder for the project. And these individuals represent global entities of developers who are building on the blockchain that are not based out of Shanghai. So NEO is a global project. So we're going to just delve really quickly into what NEO is and what differentiates it from other blockchain projects. NEO's vision is to build the smart economy, which is essentially creating an ecosystem where you can digitize physical assets in a way that you use digital identity, digital assets, and smart contracts to create that ecosystem. NEO's consensus mechanism is called delegated Byzantine fault tolerance, which can be viewed more similarly to like a delegated proof of stake network like EOS or ARC or other similar blockchains. However, there is no direct financial incentive to be able to own a node. So you don't have to spend millions and millions of dollars to be able to operate a consensus node. You just have to be operating under the guise that you benefit from having consensus nodes working on the ecosystem, and therefore your product or project built on top of the blockchain will benefit from having a public blockchain that's running properly. It requires 2/3 consensus, and unlike proof of work and proof of stake chains, we have 100% finality. So for enterprise level clients, this is important because you want to be able to understand that the transaction that was just approved and uploaded into the previous block is 100% on the blockchain from block 1 to block 1000. Whereas with proof of work or proof of stake, you have a probabilistic consensus mechanism where you have the longest chain of blocks. And the longer the chain is, the more probable that the transaction is finalized. However, with DBFT, you get 100% finality every 15 seconds. So that's something that an enterprise client might be interested in. When you are holding a NEO coin, you get distributed gas passively. So NEO is the governance token that is used to vote for important things in the network, such as consensus nodes or other governance issues that are currently being discussed. And gas is the utility token for you to launch your smart contract, participate in distributed storage, or to pay for transactions on the network. If you're a developer, if you're a company that has developers, you don't need to learn a specific language for the blockchain like you might with Solidity and Ethereum. NEO Virtual Machine can translate 90% of the languages that are coded directly onto the blockchain. So this is a benefit for your developers because they don't need to spend time learning a new language. In 2016, NEO ICO'd, and the vision then was for the entity to become a borderless global project. And we can see here that Da Hongfei, the CEO and founder of NEO, said that this is a community-driven project with contributors from overseas. And in this individual picture right here, with core developers from across the globe, we're talking about individuals from Brazil, Russia, China, Japan, the United States, various countries in Europe, and even Australia. So the people who are building the public blockchain infrastructure are decentralized, and this is more than just a project that ICO'd in 2016 in China. So how can a public blockchain be regulatory compliant when this is accessible throughout the world and there are hundreds of jurisdictions that all have different regulations and laws? Well, NEO's thesis is that this is a public infrastructure that uses smart contracts, that uses digital identity, and it uses digital assets. That is what it provides. It's not onboarding new users. It's not doing anything like that. Projects, decentralized applications, these are the entities responsible for onboarding new users. So it is on the project's onus to ensure that they're meeting local regulatory compliances and needs. In the white paper, it was fully acknowledged that there will be less anonymity. So with Bitcoin and other projects like Monero, they lean into anonymity. NEO said we're going to be focusing on digital identity. So if you're using a digital identity and you're trying to create a digitized version of physical assets, eventually at your local jurisdiction, you're going to be tied to the asset you hold. So a perfect example of this is a project that recently launched on NEO. It's called Novum. They're digitizing physical gold. Now, the way that they're ensuring that they're within compliance is they've met all the regulations in Liechtenstein they had to meet. For 1 kilogram of gold, there are 100 MNN tokens that are minted. What Novum did to verify that they actually have 100 MNN for each kilogram of gold is they hired an external auditor, Grant Thornton, and this is in the top 4, but what they're going to be doing, Novum that is they're going to be storing their audits on NEO's testnet for a distributed, decentralized file storage system. So in the vein of being transparent, this company is going to be releasing their quarterly audits so that individuals can know that whatever NNN tokens have been minted, there's an equivalent of gold being backed in the storage facilities that Novum uses. So 2017, China really clamped down on projects. They canceled ICOs, they made exchanges illegal, and NEO, as a company, as an entity, fundraised in 2016. They were able to raise approximately $5.1 million in about $98,000 in US dollar currency and over 8,100 Bitcoin. To kind of show a sign of good faith, they decided to, in 2017, sponsor Give Back Plan. So if you were an ICO participant and you wanted to get your investment back, then you had a whole year in 2017 to apply for the Sponsor Give Back Plan, which actually refunded 558 participants around $1.1 million. So this was done in a sign to show good faith to China that that Neo as a company was not trying to act in a way to defraud investors and to kind of show good faith on behalf of both the investor and the government that this is a project that's willing to be as fair as possible in the face of uncertainty. Architecturally speaking, Neo has 7 consensus nodes. Each of these individuals that operate a consensus node are a registered legal entity in their location. So Neo Foundation is a registered entity in China. KPN is a Dutch telecom provider. And City of Zion is a distributed developer group that is actually forming its legal basis here in the States. So it's between Delaware and Colorado right now where they're going to locate themselves. But then once Neo is ready to decentralize its mainnet, we have on testnet entities like Swisscom, Red4Sec, which is a security auditing firm, Matpool, which is a huge Bitcoin mining farm. So we have a wide variety of individuals that are also registered entities. And then lastly, there is a public GitHub where people from across the globe have uploaded legal documentation from various jurisdictions to provide as much information as a potential company or project who's looking to build on Neo. So we have just an example up here. These are links that you can click on the website that have information from the US, the Japan, Hong Kong, Germany. And this is community driven, so you can access the information that's been given to you and you can also upload your own information. So kind of moving forward, we talked a little bit about what Neo is and what separates it technologically from other public blockchain projects. And we talked a little bit about how, as a public blockchain, what can they do to be as regulatory compliant as possible in the face of lack of regulations. So the next half of this presentation is going to be dependent on a conversation that was held amongst these 7 public blockchains. So these are all Asian, Southeast Asian and Chinese blockchains, Bytone, Tomo Chain, VChain. I think a handful of people might have heard of them. And this was a closed-door event for the press to speak, to openly speak with these projects. So the kind of consensus at the beginning of the session was, how can we increase mass adoption? What can a public blockchain do to propagate this? And all the leaders full well knowledge that there's a lot of friction right now with public blockchains and with trying to bring blockchain cryptocurrency into current processes. So the first thing that any blockchain project needs to do in order to make this as easy as possible is to reduce friction from an end user's perspective. Secondly, projects need to be figuring out ways to integrate tokens into current traditional platforms and replace current traditional offerings so that it's easier for the end user to just choose to use USDC or US dollar without having to choose to do so. So it's on the onus of the platform to do this for the user. Secondly, integrate. In the previous conversation we had here, the session before lunch, we were talking about how we can integrate blockchain technologies into traditional infrastructures like Walmart. So VChain partnered with Walmart China to do supply chain for food safety. And VChain listened to what Walmart China was asking for, and then they provided a specific solution that dealt with their bottleneck. So Kevin Fang from VChain said, enterprise partners don't care what chain they'll use, if it's public or private, they just care that their traceability solution will work. So public blockchains need to be able to integrate into partners as they see fit. And then driving mass adoption requires a complete ecosystem that is interoperable with other ecosystems as well. So having a complete ecosystem is required to grow a user base. For example, with Neo, they're offering identity solutions, they're offering decentralized storage solutions, as well as trying to be as regulatory compliant as possible, placing the onus on local projects. Having a structural integrity, focusing on those things, will really give public blockchains success for moving forward. And then secondly, each of these successful blockchains need to be able to coordinate and interoperate with one another. So a single blockchain can't serve a real enterprise, just as an SAP solution can't serve or address one industry's total problems. So then the next few slides are going to talk about specific ways in which blockchains and these projects started discussing how they can integrate into current infrastructure, and one of them was stablecoins. So as we saw earlier, traditional finance and regulatory entities, they need to be able to simply replace a digital asset for a physical asset, or a digital asset for a current asset. And the way that these traditional industries and the way that the public blockchains and regulators are beginning to think that this is possible is by creating a fiat-backed stablecoin that can be integrated into different platforms. For the government's perspective and from the regulator's perspective, USDC can easily be swapped out for US dollar. It makes sense for them. They understand how this asset is similar to this asset. They can start making a case for it as a mental model. And then when traditional industry sees a stable coin, they see something that's not so volatile and not so scary that they can integrate. Secondly, the conversations started shifting towards why would somebody who holds assets, who holds funds, why would they want to put this into a bank when they can just digitize their asset and store it on KuCoin or Binance, stake it, and receive rewards? If I'm staking $100 worth of value on an exchange and receiving 7% back, that's way more competitive than getting 0.4% back on my savings account. So these entities were starting to talk about what does it look like when a centralized exchange starts replacing the bank. And so it's funny, the other day I'm searching through my emails, and Coinbase lets me know that I can now put USDC, I can get 1.25% APY back for that, which is more competitive than online banking models now. As the rates have shifted earlier this year, savers have been less incented to save their money as the APY has gone down. But now Coinbase is offering a better return than a traditional bank. Another sort of interesting, unique concept that the participants didn't really fully flesh out, but that came out of the conversation was how can we incorporate some sort of WTO? How can we create specific activities that are allowed in specific jurisdictions? So Dahong Fei, the founder of NEO, he pointed out that European and US-based projects are more likely to register in Switzerland, whereas an Asian project is more likely to register in Singapore. So how can a WTO be created to overlap across chains and create a better division of labor, where you understand that you're going to have specific templates that are met in each of these jurisdictions that you choose to register? So how can a WTO do the heavy lifting for a project that's based on one of these regions? But at the end of the day, I think this is something that we all agree upon, that blockchain is great and we want more companies using blockchain, but we don't understand what the regulations are. We don't understand that if today I start a company, will 3 years down the road, once some legislation comes in, will my company be forced to shut down? So this kind of transitions into what China's outlook is from a regulatory perspective, according to the 7 participants that were at the symposium. So I just want to caveat this, that these were all projects that were talking about the perspective of regulations, and I was just there covering it. So none of this information is set in stone, and this could change at any minute because governments choose to regulate in a way that they choose to. However, the conversation started with 2017. Why was China so heavy-handed? Why was there so much FUD back then? We thought Bitcoin was going to get shut down and it was never going to be allowed. However, what China did do was shut down ICOs and shut down exchanges because of illegal fundraising strategies. So Jun Lee, he's the founder of Ontology. They're working on a digital identity solution that can be interoperable across chains. He said that permissionless doesn't mean you're not allowed to be non-compliant. Fraud is illegal everywhere, and China isn't an exception. So this kind of leans into the point that China wanted to avoid the fact that people can buy Bitcoin, and then they can just never claim their assets, or they can never claim their gains, and then they just made a great amount of gains without paying taxes. which is something that the US agrees with the United States. But what China is starting to talk about, and again, these are just conversations, is that activities on the blockchain will require regulation, and not just the exchanges, but they're also looking into how a user's private wallet can be part of that architecture that's regulated. We're going to have to pay more attention to what that means in news and information coming out later in the future. However, Yuanji Zhang of Conflux said, and this was generally not an agreement upon the 7 public blockchains, that blockchain and regulation aren't incompatible. At the end of the day, these entities are excited and happy that they have some guidance and regulation because they know which box that they can work within and they know what rules they can and can't break. In the West, we thought China was heavy-handed in 2017 because exchanges and ICOs were banned. And we thought Bitcoin's going to be banned as well. They're just going to shut down blockchain. That has not been the case in the past 2 years. And generally, what these projects were saying is that they appreciated the regulation that was made available. Even more so, there are 3 Chinese regulators that issue a joint guideline. So could you imagine that, where if all our regulators in the States issued a joint guideline and maybe even got on the same page? Is that necessarily a bad thing? I don't think so. Oftentimes we see the Chinese flag and we think highly authoritarian government. However, these companies know where they do and don't stand, and actually Chinese blockchain projects spend more money on legal costs than blockchain companies in any other country in the world. So these guys have a great understanding of where they're coming from and where they're going to be going. So kind of like lastly, before I wrap this up, Libra was kind of brought about, hit the main stage in early summer of this year. And I know that I've heard these sort of conversations in the US, but that really lit a fire under China. They don't want to be the last country to digitize their currency. In fact, they want to be the first. So there are rumors and whispers that are being spoken about amongst public blockchain projects based out of China that, and individuals who are in the regulatory agency, that the PBOC is seeking to issue its digital version of the yuan sooner rather than later. There was conversation about China even being the first country to issue a digital version of their currency. Why is this a big deal? Because in Q1 of 2019, $8.3 trillion of money was transacted all through handheld applications. 83% of $8.3 trillion was managed by Alipay and WeChat. So this is why you want to see a government that's digitizing its currency when it is already working in such a digital world with how its money, its funds are transferred. Further, the conversation is sort of starting to change from let's ban Bitcoin and ban ICOs and exchanges because of illegal fundraising tactics to let's make a digital currency with a distributed ledger because now we can combat money laundering and other illegal activities. So it's 2 years later, we're seeing the shift in the narrative. However, at the end of the day, the question still remains. If something that's so handy as Alipay or WeChat I can distribute funds on, then why would I want to jump over to the PBOC digital currency? So the question remains, when are all these regulations coming down? When's China going to issue this information? When's the PBOC going to launch the digital yuan? And the answer is nobody in that room knew. Nobody knows. These are still just kind of whisperings that people who are in the know have with conversations they've had with regulators. But these are questions that are on the mind of Chinese and Asian blockchain projects, as well as regulators out in China as well. So, again, I'm Dylan Grabowski. I host a local meetup. We have lots of information on a monthly basis about what's happening at NEO at a local level here in Colorado, as well as a larger level. So if you're based out of Colorado, feel free to go to meetup.com, NEO Colorado, and register. Or if you need any point of contact with any individual at NEO, or you just want to reach out to me to find out more information, I'm very accessible on Twitter and also through email at dylan@neonewstoday.com. So thanks for coming in and chatting with me today. we have like 1 minute for questions if anyone has any.
You're running the company, would you change anything, do anything different?
If I was running Neo, would I do anything different? Yeah, I would decentralize the mainnet nodes. I would get 5 out of 7 of them out of control of the Neo Foundation and distribute them to the projects that are already running on testnet. That's the first thing I would do. Dan?
I've heard rumblings about grants and things for people to come on board and start getting plugged into Neo. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I'm actually the first recipient of a grant that was offered through a community developer group. We're building a local project that's going to onboard people who attend meetups a lot easier by giving them access to a time-stamped wallet, and then they have 24 hours to send funds from the free wallet with the cryptocurrency to a wallet they downloaded within the ecosystem. So the COZ grant program, if you have an idea and you want to work on this on weeknights and weekends, but you just haven't found the time, well, here's a financial incentive that will help you or your developer to build out the product that you want, as well as we're going to provide you with access to the technical know-how for the people who develop on the blockchain. So if you want to learn more about the City of Zion grants, they're up to $5,000 per application, then please reach out to me because we're always looking for local and US-based and international projects to kind of highlight. Sweet. Thank you, everyone.